Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Neat Art History, where I am sitting telling you some art history stories while at this point occasionally knitting. And welcome to another video about a amazing and very famous during her lifetime woman artist, Elisabeth Vigée-Lebrun, as you can see by the name of the video. So iconic artist, as we can say, because if you are into the French history, especially history of French Revolution and Marie Antoinette, you definitely saw Elisabeth Vigée-Lebrun's works, because she was the main painter of the Queen Marie Antoinette, and all of the most iconic paintings, these iconic portraits of Marie Antoinette, were done by Vigée-Lebrun. I will link down below certain sources also, so you can go yourself and like dive deeper into that if you want. I think that I found her diaries also, so I think they are somewhere. I will link them, yeah, if not sorry, but I think there is. And yeah, and today I'll be just sitting talking with you. I don't really want to need anything, so I think that's all that I wanted to say. So without further ado, let's dive into our topic today. Elisabeth Vigée-Lebrun, she was born on April 16, 1755. Her father, Louis Vigée, he was also a painter, and he is remembered and mentioned in quite a bit of resources as rather mediocre painter. He was a portraitist and pastelist, so the one who's working with pastels as main media. And but I need to make a little remark here that he might have been a mediocre painter, but he was still part of art scene, of Paris art scene, and so he still had a lot of friends, like very famous artists back then and now also especially. And so in the future, those friends, they really they kind of helped Elisabeth to establish herself in this Paris, at least Paris, art world, if not the whole France, but we will talk about this a bit later. And overall, just, her father, he did not really care for fame and money. So from an early age, Vigée was surrounded, Elisabeth, by art and received her first lessons from her father. Information about her mother varies though, because her mom's name was Jean Messen, and according to some sources, she is mentioned as a strict woman who did not approve of the behavior and frivolity of her husband, and that's why she raised Elisabeth and her younger brother Etienne quite strictly. In other sources, she is described in a radically different light, as this charming and beautiful woman, and I think that the truth lies somewhere in between. At the age of 6 then, Elisabeth was sent to a Catholic boarding house, where they were actually very unhappy with her, because during classes she absent-mindedly looked out the window. She drew in her notebooks, like everything that came to her mind, everything that she was seeing around. And at the age of 8 then, she drew a baker who came to them with goods, and it was so similar to him that Louis was determined to make her an artist. It doesn't matter that this profession was considered a men's profession, obviously. At that time, more and more French women took the brush in their delicate hands by this time already. Some for the sake of fashion, some for earnings, and etc. Her father was her first teacher, obviously, and Louis, belonging to the artistic profession, somewhat opened the door for Elisabeth as well. One of the good friends of Elisabeth's father was Devesne, a member and deputy professor of the Academy of St. Luc, Academy of Art. So for a certain time he said, this is the most important, that he taught little Elisabeth. However, when Elisabeth turned 12, her father died, and the mother then remarried a few years later. The girl turned 15, and Jean's new husband was the jeweler Jacques-François Lesèvre. As noted, the stepfather did not like the little girl very much and did not want to spend money on her painting studies. Therefore, her father's old friends, Briare, he was a member of the Royal Academy also, and Doyenne, another artist, they taught the girl for free for some time. And they helped with the girl's first exhibition. So the whole of Paris learned about her very quickly. This is how the first orders began to arrive. at that moment, Elisabeth was still only 15 years old. So her customers were the women of the nobility at the French court, some princesses, countesses, duchesses, my God, celebrities of the day. So yeah, so she started her career at 15, as we can say. Elisabeth Vigée's extraordinary rise into notice brought her the friendship and counsel of Joseph Vernet, who gave her the most precious advice, which was a beacon to her career all her years. So he basically said that, my child, do not follow any system of schools. Consult only the works of the great Italian and Flemish masters. But above all things, make as many studies as you can from nature. Nature is the supreme master, and if you study nature with care, it will prevent you from picking up any mannerisms. Doyen and Greuze also helped her with suggestions, but she was from the beginning her own teachers, we can say. Devesne and Briard only flattered themselves by claiming her tutoring. And well, because the girl showed in no way the slightest sign of their influence. The stepfather rented a small cottage in the town of Chalot, where he took his family, including Elisabeth, obviously, and Elisabeth's life was morally difficult under the tyranny of her stepfather. However, these trips to the countryside became fateful, actually. After all, it was on one of these walks in Marly with a family friend that Elisabeth actually met the young Marie Antoinette for the first time. In general, the girls' lives actually were very strangely similar, to be honest. They were born in the same year, and in terms of some age developments also, they had certain stuff going on exactly the same ages. I mean, you can look it up yourself a bit also. So when I was reading that, I picked those things up. It was strangely, like eerily sometimes similar, and I think this is why, like, a bit later and they became friends, because at this point they met one another, they greeted one another, but I don't think that they knew at this point that it was how their lives will intertwine with one another. So the artist's first surviving painting dates to 1770, and it was a portrait of her mother. It was portrait of Madame Lesèvre, née Jean Meisen, widow of Vigée, mother of the artist. At the age of 19 then, she became the youngest student of the Academy of St. Luc. At the same time, the girl's family moved to a new apartment in the center of Paris, and Elisabeth began to paint commissioned portraits. But her stepfather appropriated all income from creative activities as a guardian, obviously. And in some sources, it is also noted that during this period, the stepfather began actually to actively court her. But I mean, all of this obviously is allegedly. So, and we never know the truth at this point. And because Elisabeth grew up to be a beautiful girl with a beautiful figure and face, etc. So it's likely that there was a story like that. I genuinely believe that in that. And in addition, Elisabeth was already making good money with paintings. And so this behavior of the stepfather was disgusting to the young girl, and she really wanted to run away from it. And I read also in some resources that, it was said that he was sometimes, he could like come to her and grab her by the waist or something like that. And then it was said that, and I think she actually wrote it somewhere in her diaries, that she felt herself really uncomfortable with that. And I mean, again, we will never know, it's speculation at this point, but I genuinely think that something like this might have happened, but she kind of escaped it, because the only way to get out of this situation for her and as for a woman was to get married, and this is exactly what she has done. Her chosen one was Jean-Baptiste Pierre Le Brun, a again mediocre artist also, who flourished more as a picture dealer, art dealer, and actually they met in his studio where Elisabeth liked to go, because after all here she could meet many famous artists and just simply admire the works of her colleagues at that time. She didn't fall in love with Le Brun, rather she felt a spiritual closeness with this older person who loved paintings as much as her, and loved to travel. And and it's just overall what I gathered also from reading about their relationship and everything. It was like not like love as we can imagine. No, she did not crazily fall in love with him. He was literally her plan to escape her household and her stepfather, basically. Well, and at some point I think also her mom, and to become her own person, because he was gaining like she was gaining like quite a lot of money at this point already. So she was, you know, in our period of time she would have been completely, I'm more than sure, unmarried and like, you know, completely independent, because she like could have allowed herself to be like that. But with Lebrun, so they met in his studio, and I actually remember reading, I think, that he was actually engaged at this point to someone else. But yeah, at some point they just, you know, they got secretly into a relationship, and yeah, and then married. But we'll get into this in a second. But yeah, another thing about Lebrun is that he was a weak character, because he, you know, willingly succumbing to any vice in the form of wine, wine, women, or playing cards, like gambling. She found out rather quickly about all of these weaknesses, but was still, you know, after they married. But again, they got married on January 11, 1776, and it is said that it's mentioned that it was a secret marriage, actually, because no one approved of this marriage. Not her father, not her stepfather, not her mom, as far as I understood. Also, not some, you know, her artist acquaintances. Like, no one. Literally, everyone knew who Lebrun is, and they really did not approve her to be, you know, to get married with her. But well, they secretly married, so no one could do anything about this anymore. And yeah, and it was obviously not a really happy marriage, but still, Elisabeth gave birth to a girl. They had one daughter, and that was like her only child. So they named her Julie. And it is noted that Elisabeth was actually very attached to her daughter, and she took her everywhere with her if it was possible, you know, trying to spend as much time as possible with her daughter. Perhaps, you know, this love we can say to Julie replaced, like, you know, her lack of love in the family and with her husband. So over time, when Elisabeth began to receive very good money for her portraits, Lebrun simply quit his job and just, you know, began to spend all his time in playhouses. And of course, the relationship between the married couple deteriorated more and more every year. And well, thus, after 5 years of marriage, Elisabeth took Julie and she moved out, actually. She moved to a separate apartment to work there. At that time, she became a favorite of the Parisian nobility, surpassing her mentors in popularity. So the whimsical twist, you know, of Rococo gave way to rustic simplicity in the spirit of Rousseau, and Vigée-Lebrun's paintings, with their healthy beauty, turned out to be more appropriate than ever. After painting portraits of several ministers, she received an invitation from Marie Antoinette herself. So they again started to get into contact. And so Marie Antoinette appreciated the artist's work very highly and showered her with additional orders. In addition, Marie Antoinette gave Vigée-Lebrun the title of her first portraitist, often took the artist with her for walks, performed duets with her, and they became practically friends. So Vigée-Lebrun painted the Queen almost 30 times before the royal family was imprisoned and, well, later executed, as we know. The first portrait of the Queen was painted in 1779, so both of the girls, Elizabeth and Marie Antoinette was 24, in which we can see the young Queen with a large basket and dressed in a satin gown, holding rose in her hand. And it was painted the year after the birth of her first child, Madame Royale. In 1782, the Vigée-Lebruns visited Flandre, where Elisabeth was acquainted with the works of Flemish masters. She especially liked Rubens, and she was influenced by the painting Chapeau de Paille, and this canvas by Rubens clearly inspired her to paint the portrait of herself in a straw hat, where she stands based, in this sunlight, her palette in her hand also. Since then, her art has had an added sense of style, a more complete reflection of atmosphere, and in her handling of painting and application of color, she soon reached the pinnacle of her skills, as it's said by by her researchers. In 1783, shortly after returning from Flanders, she was nominated for election to the Royal Academy of Art, obviously, but after all, her self-portrait caused a sensation. However, to enter, she had to draw a standard picture. Elisabeth chose the theme of allegory, peace bringing back abundance, and the painting was accepted. It is now in Louvre and taken to the Royal Academy. Many of Elisabeth's colleagues envied her and resented such success, so this whole situation was not without scandals. Even then, gossip began that it was the Queen, actually, who, on her part, exerted some pressure on French artistic circles, so that Vigée-Lebrun was successfully elected to the Royal Academy of Arts, which allowed Vigée-Lebrun also to sell many of her works to Versailles and officially exhibit at the Salon. There was also a scandal with the artist Ménage, who later became the director of the Academy in Rome, and so his work, The Birth of the Dauphin, was hung under the work of Vigée-Lebrun. And it is said that mostly it was his supporters actually tried to convince the audience that the works were surprisingly similar, and what added fuel to the fire was also the fact that that Ménage lived in the same house as Vigée-Lebrun. So I believe he lived somewhere, I think under her, on first floors, and she lived on higher floors, something like that. So rumors began that Ménage actually was in the habit of painting, like fully painting, or at least completing, some works of the young artist. In particular, a certain Adelaide Labille-Guillard, she was also an artist, she expressed her indignation, who believed that Vigée-Lebrun had brazenly taken her place as the best artist of France. And through her efforts, gossip about Elisabeth's affair with the Minister of Finance, Count Calonne, spread through Paris also. A portrait of which she also painted in 1785 and presented at the Salon. And I also remember reading that this portrait was taken as some kind of confirmation of these rumors, because it was something about the composition, so back then this composition was considered to be pretty intimate or something like that, even though it's not an intimate portrait or anything, but back then they had those little hints that now we as a modern population do not understand, and we can know about those just through learning history and stuff like that. But this portrait also was it had a lot of rumors around when it was presented on the Salon. But at the same Salon also she showed a portrait of Marie Antoinette's children, and this picture was actually warmly received, while there was a lot of chatter around Calonne's portrait again. At the Salon 1787, she was 32 at this point, there is a record of a picture of Marie Antoinette and her children. Other sources actually say that date this painting to 1788, and also she showed her self-portrait with her daughter Julie, and again some sources actually date this one to 1786. And among others, those also of Mademoiselle Dugazon and of Madame Moll Raymond, the pretty actress of the Comédie Française, and this portrait specifically is one of Vigée-Lebrun's masterpieces. The last portrait that Vigée-Lebrun painted of the doomed queen was the canvas known as Marie Antoinette and Her Children, in which the queen is seen seated beside a cradle with baby Duke of Normandy on her knee, the little Madame Royale at her side, and the small Dauphin pointing into the cradle. For some time after the opening actually of the Salon, there was just only an empty frame hung on the wall, because the painting had to be completed not being completed by the time. However, almost before the start of the revolution, the frame finally, stopped hanging empty, and Vigée-Lebrun gave it to the Salon. In 1789, a fake correspondence then between Calonne and Vigée-Lebrun was made public, in which they mocked the royal family in every possible way, and as a result of the scandal, Calonne had to leave his post, and Marie Antoinette refused to see her favorite artist. However, this is not the main reason why the Minister of Finances obviously left his post, because during this period the revolution was actively emerging and many governors began to flee. And well, a bit later in time, Bastille happened. But with Marie Antoinette, unfortunately, their relationship, they ended like that with Marie Antoinette with Vigée-Lebrun. So from being good friends, they unfortunately became, it's kind of strange also that Marie Antoinette believed that, but at the end of the day, she also was not herself a very stable figure, considering her life and consider how poorly treated she was. So at the end of the day, maybe it's not so strange that she believed those rumors and believed this fake correspondence. So with every day, with every hour, it became more and more obvious for Vigée-Lebrun that it was more and more dangerous for her to stay in Paris because of her close connection with the aristocracy and with the queen specifically, because at this point I suppose everyone knew about their very close relationships. So in October of 1789, Vigée-Lebrun left Paris with her daughter and went to Italy. And this trip, her trip lasted for the next 12 years actually. So despite her excellent financial condition at this point, Elisabeth left with 80 francs in her pocket. And this exile eventually brought her not only a new home, but also finally created some immunity from the shameless husband who spent her money, her hard-earned money left and right on gambling, on wine, on women, and etc. So her first stop was at Turin in Italy, and it was a short stay. She found that her, in these travels actually, she found that her name and fame had gone, before her and very vastly through Europe. At Bologna, no French citizen was allowed to stay for more than 24 hours, but for Vigée-Lebrun, permission was brought without her even asking for it. So she spent 3 days there, gazing at the masterpieces of the Bologna school, Bologna art school, the artists and everything, and was made actually also a member of its academy. So here she was soon at work again, in Italy, overall with palette and brushes, upon the portrait of herself, which she just promised to the gallery of Florence. So there's this gallery where all the self-portrait, there's plenty of self-portraits of famous artists, and it is still there, and it is one of the most exquisite images she ever painted. She's sunny, smiling, happy, and we can see that basically her youth came back to her. Her next stop was Rome, where she stayed for the next 8 months, and after that she came to Naples. Here she painted many portraits also. Specifically, what we can highlight is the portrait of Lady Hamilton. There she painted a portrait also of Paciello, which she sent to the Salon in Paris, where it was hung next to David's work. And David is also a titan of French art. And this portrait was received with enthusiasm also. Vigée-Lebrun then, she painted the Queen of Naples, her 2 eldest daughters, and the Prince Royal. More and more disappointing news came back from Paris, so Elisabeth quickly started to realize that she could not return home anytime soon. So she decided that, she didn't want to stay in Italy either anymore, as I gathered. So from Italy she went further to Austria, to Vienna. And she lived in Vienna for the next few years, from 1792 to 1795, and obviously here they knew her very well, because some of her portraits of Marie Antoinette, they are in Vienna also in some museums, and they were a favorite of Marie Antoinette's mother, so obviously she was very respected and admired in Austria. And it was while at in Vienna in her 39th year, she was 39 at this point, on the 3rd of June 1794, during the terror, that Vigée-Lebrun took out her act of divorce. So she finally divorced Lebrun, who, you know, somehow he survived all of this. You know, all of this was going on in Paris, and he now was the citizen Lebrun. So, you know, he was with all of this revolution and everything. So basically, again, he survived somehow. Well, somehow, I think we all know people like that, but yeah. And he also actually had the audacity to publish his, well, basically we can say like autobiography of, you know, about him as this citizen Lebrun, painter for a second, even though he, again, as far as I gathered, he didn't paint anything. So he was living out of Vigée-Lebrun money, just again going around gambling and just living his life. But well, now he was a painter. So after Vienna, she got to Prague. So at this point, she was 40, and after that, she was just roaming a bit through Europe. She passed. She then go to Dresden, then from Dresden to Berlin, and at the end of all of this, she ended actually in Russian Empire, in St. Petersburg specifically. She arrived there in July of 1795. In St. Petersburg, she took up work with renewed vigor, and she produced here actually 84 portraits. So she was very productive during this period of time. And she spent actually next 6 years in the Russian Empire, and she made here also quite a fortune actually. So with the arrival of a new regime in France, the situation began to improve, and well, the doors of Paris opened again for her. However, she was in no hurry to return at this point, because now it was a completely different Paris basically, because all of, like, not all, but biggest part of her friends were either executed or they immigrated, saving her lives, all of this nobility and everything. So she was scared even to go back there. However, after the news that her only daughter, Julie, the greatest joy of her life basically, she decided to marry a Russian, Vigée-Lebrun decided to leave, because, you know, St. Petersburg no longer warmed her soul. So Julie married a man, and again, this Russian, I don't even think that he was, I don't remember actually, but he was not, you know, of a higher nobility, definitely. So I think he was like, you know, this like minor nobility or something, or even not a nobility. I don't know. I to be honest, I'm sorry, I don't remember. It was just some guy, basically, and that's why. And I mean, not just that's why. I think she just overall did not approve her marrying. I mean, Vigée-Lebrun did not approve Julie of marrying a Russian. Which is a good thing, yeah, you're a smart woman. But I mean, Julie at this point was a grown woman herself, grown as we can say, and Elisabeth could not say anything to her, and so yeah, but she was super. She said to her that you will be unhappy with him, like, I'm telling you, you will be unhappy with him. Julie obviously said no. You don't understand anything and everything like that, and so she married this guy, and news flash, she was unhappy indeed in this marriage. And after that, we don't really know much about Julie. I mean, at least I did not find anything particular about, you know, her life. I mean, we just know that at some point they became pretty poor actually, that Julie actually wrote to her mom at some point. You know, she wrote to ask for some money, but Elisabeth declined. And after that, I believe they never actually talked again, and Julie died like prior to Elisabeth, but we'll get to that at the end of the video. So at this point, Julie married this Russian guy. Elisabeth is very unhappy with that, and she decides to leave St. Petersburg. And at the age of 46, that's exactly what she did. She left Russian Empire for Paris forever. She never came back. However, before that she stopped in Germany, where she also worked and painted portraits of some German nobilities. But returning home, she was happily met by her brother, his wife, and even Lebrun himself. So as I understood, they had this situation as some couples have, that they're marrying, they're living super unhappy, then they're divorcing, and they are continuing to be good friends. So I think it was something like that with these two. Well, however, as Elisabeth had feared, that was not the same Paris she left 12 years ago, obviously. So already in 6 months, Elisabeth went to London. So here she found herself among her old friends, those who were able to run away from revolution, and also the doors of British, more English nobility opened to her. She painted George IV, she painted Byron actually, and among many others. The rage for portraits by her kept her in England for 3 years, and she returned to Paris in 1805. She was 50 by this time, but she returned through Holland, Netherlands, right, and Belgium, then to France. However, again, Elisabeth no longer found peace in France and in Paris specifically, so she continued to travel around Europe for a bit and stayed in different countries. But as she got older, this became more and more difficult to her, so Elisabeth bought a house in the countryside in Louisiane, and she began living between that house and her estate in the city in Paris. The beginning of the 19th century, though, brought many personal losses to her, because her ex-husband died in 1813, so she was sad about that. Then in 1819, Julie died, I suppose, because they became poor and everything. And then in 1820, her brother died. And so this is what I said, that as far as I remember reading, as far as I found, that they never talked with Julie again after she asked for this money and everything. And, after Vigée-Lebrun said that, I told you that you'll be unhappy. I don't know. There's not a lot about, their relationship at this point, to be honest. Online, at least, maybe there is in some books in some library somewhere. Or maybe it is more in her diaries, because I'm not gonna lie, I did not read them from cover to cover. Yeah. And I actually did not saw any info about where, well, I suppose Julie is buried somewhere now in modern Russia, somewhere there in St. Petersburg or around, I don't know, to be honest. I don't think that she was brought back to France. Well, maybe some of you know out there, so you can tell me where she's buried, because again, I don't remember seeing any info about that. Yeah, but well, unfortunately, Elisabeth, she outlived basically everyone, and also at this point art also stopped bringing her happiness and the desired results, and she just overall, her last works are not so skillful, as we can say, as was before. The only consolation left were her two nieces, Madame de Rivière and Madame Tripert-le-Franc, so they were the only two who were with her till her last breath. And well, at 5 a.m. on March 30 of 1842, Elisabeth died at home at the age of 87. So she lived a full, very long life, and she was buried according to her wish at Louisiane, where actually in the church still hangs the picture of Saint Geneviève painted by her. And so the artist, she left her memoirs actually, and they were published during her lifetime. They were published in France in 1835 to 1837. And according to the list compiled by the artist herself, she's done 662 portraits, 15 paintings of historical and allegorical content, and 15 landscapes. So after Rubens, we can say that she was one of the most prolific artists in the history of art, because Rubens is well known for his extreme amount of paintings that he finished during his lifetime and done. And after that we have Elisabeth Vigée-Lebrun. Unfortunately, she was she was pretty quickly forgotten, so not a lot of people know her now actually. But yeah, that was the story of Elisabeth Vigée-Lebrun with her amazing paintings. So this is everything that I have about her for you for today. Yeah, and I hope you found out something new for yourself. As usual, it's the most important for me, and something interesting, and I am more than sure that by the end of the video a lot of you, or maybe some of you, had this, you know, little like aha moment when you saw certain portraits of Marie Antoinette, and you found out yourself that you actually also saw those portraits and you know those paintings. But maybe you also, like me, had no idea who Elisabeth Vigée-Lebrun was and how famous actually she was during her lifetime. But yeah, this is everything for today. I wish you all the best, and I hope to see you in the next videos. Bye bye.